Okay, before this compilation begins, I want to let you guys know that first, it is a compilation of old content. So you're going to be seeing my old videos all in one, so go ahead and get your pillows ready and take a nice nap. Number two, those who are sticklers for pronunciation, I do say
Super Mario Bros.
throughout this video, so no need to beat that dead horse in the comments section. So that's about it. I tried to improve my sound for my old setup, and I also added some corrections, goodies, and enhancements, so look out for those throughout this compilation. Alright, love ya, bye.
Neatness counts.
That's right, Mario. And by the way,
Move a little piece of spaghetti on your overalls. Luigi.
This is Jumpman. This little character here would eventually become the biggest name in video games after his debut in the Nintendo arcade hit Donkey Kong. This is Mario in his most primitive form before he even had a name, and while this may be his first appearance, what are the true origins of this carpenter turned plumber? And yeah, I said carpenter. This video has been a long time coming, so welcome to Origin Oracle, my children, the series where I take your favorite video game characters and explore their backstories. I guess we'll call this Season 2? So fair warning, take any attempt I make to connect these plot lines in Mario games with a grain of salt. While these plot points are all true, there's no official timeline of events. However, I'll do my best to make it make sense. So I think most of us know that Mario's very first appearance was in a little game called Donkey Kong, released for arcades in 1981. The setup is simple. Jumpman needs to scale this construction site while avoiding obstacles to save his girlfriend Pauline from the big bad ape Donkey Kong. I think the origins of these two characters are so deeply intertwined that I may have to do an origin video on Donkey Kong at some point as well. This game would go on to put Nintendo on the map in America, with the arcade machines selling like hotcakes in the West, due to the game's simple but challenging mechanics. So there's not much more to the overall plot of Donkey Kong, but we'll come back to this game shortly, as there's more to Mario's past aside from climbing ladders at a construction site. Back in the early 80s, Mario was created by the legendary Shigeru Miyamoto, who worked with Nintendo to produce a best-selling video game hit to rival the sales of Pac-Man. Initially, Miyamoto-san wanted to make a game that would use the popular cartoon characters Popeye, Bluto, and Olive Oyl. And yeah, even in the 80s, licensing was a bitch, so he had to push forward with his own original characters. And if you're familiar with Popeye, you'd see the concepts from Mario, Donkey Kong, and Pauline are pretty damn similar to those characters, so with that context, the whole idea for the Donkey Kong game should make a lot more sense. So with his new original characters, unnamed protagonist Donkey Kong and Lady, yes, those are their original names, Miyamoto-san would plan to originally have unnamed protagonist, aka Mario, escape from a maze, but then he made the ingenious decision to give Mario the ability to jump to avoid obstacles, and the rest is history. Funny enough, the name Jumpman was only featured in the English instructions for Donkey Kong, and the sales brochure for the game dubbed him Little Mario. Meanwhile, Miyamoto-san wanted a best all-around type character who could be featured in any type of game. And this would come to fruition, seeing he's been featured in sports titles, racing titles, party games, and multiple cameos in other Nintendo titles, to name a few. Miyamoto would initially attempt to go with the name Mr. Video, but later would go on to say if he went with that name, Mario would probably have disappeared off the face of the earth. And I can't help but agree with him there. Just imagine the game title Super Mr. Video Bros 3. So where did the name Mario come from? Well, you may already know this story, but allegedly while Donkey Kong was being localized for the West, a financially struggling Nintendo of America was not keeping up with the rent payments for a warehouse they had out in Seattle. So in turn, Nintendo's president at the time allegedly got a nice cuss-in from their landlord, Mario Segale.
I got my money, bitch.
Hey, don't call me bitch, I'm a grown man!
Who they decided to name the character after, and may also be responsible for Mario's Italian heritage. Nintendo would eventually confirm this story in 2015, while Segale was eagerly awaiting his royalty checks for many years. Rest in peace to the original Mario. Okay, so we're gonna put a pause on the conception story for a while.
Come on now, dawg.
So since we're talking about the origin story of Mario, we need to go back to Mario's past. Back to the earliest game in the Super Mario timeline. Yes, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Released in 1995 for the Super Nintendo. It served as a follow-up to the highly successful Super Mario World, and for the most part, the game focuses on Yoshi, and it would be the first of its kind for the ongoing Yoshi series. This game was unique not only for its new gameplay surrounding the Yoshi character, but for the very first time we see Mario at a very young age. The story begins with Mario and his twin brother Luigi being delivered as newborns to their parents by a stork, because that's how babies are made.
Wait! Kids, ask your parents where babies come from!
Meanwhile, Kamek, Bowser's right-hand man and babysitter, foresees that these two babies will definitely be a thorn in their side in the future, and decides to snatch them on their way to their parents. While Kamek's successful at capturing the stork and baby Luigi, Mario plummets toward the sea, only to land on the back of Yoshi, and it doesn't take long for him and his tribe to decide to save his brother and stop Kamek and baby Bowser in the process. And just as a side note, the instructions booklet also mentions that Mario can sense the location of his twin brother, and I'm kinda curious if they still have that power, you know? Shout out to all my twin viewers out there. Once the Yoshis save the day, the game ends with the stork successfully delivering Mario and Luigi to their parents, who still have no face to really show. Somewhat of a sequel for the game would later be released for the Nintendo DS in 2006, known as Yoshi's Island DS. And I don't necessarily consider this to be canon, but what is canon in the Mario series these days? This time, Kamek and his army steal a lot more babies from the Mushroom Kingdom with the help of Bowser from the future, who is trying to collect the 7 star children, which would allow him to become the ruler of the universe.
What?
Okay, so I won't spend too long on this one, but the Yoshis help baby Mario, Peach, Donkey Kong, and Wario save baby Luigi, who was taken hostage yet again. And I think it's better to pretend this game didn't happen just to keep things simple. There would be yet another follow-up to the original Yoshi's Island known as Yoshi's New Island, which I believe serves as the official sequel. Picking up right where Yoshi's Island left off, this bumbling stork realizes that he delivered the Mario brothers to the wrong house. So off he goes to the real parents, and big surprise, Kamek steals them again, with Mario falling back down to a different island this time around, Egg Island, which happens to be the second home for the Yoshi clan, which happens to be taken over by baby Bowser. There's a lot of coincidences here, so, you know, maybe Mario is special. With Mario and the Yoshis teaming up like before, it's off to rescue Luigi once again. The plot here is a little simpler until you find out that the adult version of Bowser travels through space and time to cause trouble. And if you're wondering how Bowser can travel so freely to the past, go ahead and play Mario's Time Machine. Yoshi's New Island legitimizes that game for me.
Wait, don't I know you? My name's Mario. Who are you?
I'm dying to stream that game, by the way. So of course the Yoshis save the day once again by defeating Bowser and saving Luigi and the stork, who finally delivers the Mario brothers to their proper parents. Okay, fast forward back to the future. Mario is all grown up and dodging barrels being thrown at him by a giant gorilla in an attempt to save his girlfriend. And at this point, he's not even a plumber. He actually started as a carpenter to fit the construction site setting in this game, which I believe is assumed to be New York or some kind of unspecified US city. More on that later. His very early design was depicted as a typical hardworking handyman to further push his popularity in the West, with Miyamoto drawing inspiration from Italian New Yorker stereotypes to make it easier for Americans to identify with him. And I guess seeing the popularity of the original Donkey Kong, this technique ended up working. His overalls were colored red with a blue shirt beneath it to make the colors pop and contrast well on screen with the background. Many of Mario's features were included to work around the arcade machine's graphical limitations, with his nose and mustache being emphasized to avoid having to draw mouth and facial expression. The iconic hat was thrown on top of his head to avoid having to animate his hair as he jumped. And seeing how we still can't get hair right in 2022 in video games, I think this is a genius move on Miyamoto's part.
That's the
wrong with her?
So either
what's wrong with her
T-Bug
face?
catches in, or I'm on my way out.
Why is it stretching in and out?
Judy, please.
So in 1982, Donkey Kong Jr. would be released as a follow-up for arcades, reversing the rules as Mario throws Donkey Kong in a cage after the events of the first game.
I got Donkey Kong, and now I'll get you too, Junior.
I'm Donkey Kong Jr., and that's my papa.
You take control of Donkey Kong Jr., who has to make his way across vines to the top to release his papa from Mario's evil grasp. And yeah, by this point, our carpenter friend here is officially known as Mario. Funny enough, in the NES version of the game, Mario will die after falling from the platform when Junior saves Donkey Kong. So yeah, Mario has somewhat of a checkered past when it comes to his relationship with the DK family. Starting in 1983, Mario would be featured in a few Game & Watch titles that have him taking on more odd jobs. For context, the Game & Watch series were handhelds Nintendo sold with built-in games, where the goal was to achieve a high score.
Game Watch, Game Watch, Game Watch, Game Watch.
Even before the release of Mario Bros, there was a Mario Bros Game & Watch, where Mario starts doing odd jobs with his brother Luigi, as they work for a bottling plant. The game has them loading the packages of bottles onto a delivery truck, which is very different from the Mario Bros game that would come later. This would in fact be Luigi's very first appearance in a video game, and this is something I didn't know actually. There were other Game & Watch releases that featured Mario working at a cement factory, as a juggler, or how about when he's a soldier in the war and Mario bombs away?
What?
Yeah, this is my first time hearing that too. Ironically, none of these games depict him as a plumber. But later in 1983, Nintendo would release another arcade classic simply known as Mario Bros.
Mario, where are you?
What?
Not to be confused with Super Mario Bros. Or the Game & Watch title I mentioned before. This is already getting confusing. Someone help me before I throw this script in the garbage.
To be deleted?
So Mario would finally join Luigi and take on the job as a plumber in the sewers of New York, fighting turtles and crabs that I'm sure are thriving below the streets of Manhattan right now. I honestly like to think this is Mario's broke phase, where he's down for any job just to make ends meet, and he suckers Luigi into helping him with anything they can find. Mario and Luigi would also go on to star in Versus Wrecking Crew. This is an arcade game where the brothers work at a demolition site, where they break all the walls up for demolition before the enemies in the game can interfere. It wasn't until 1985 where Nintendo would release the smash hit Super Mario Bros. For the Nintendo Entertainment System, which would bring Mario and Luigi to the Mushroom Kingdom, where a majority of the future games take place. The story for the original Super Mario Bros. Is simple. Peaceful mushroom people living in the Mushroom Kingdom are invaded by the Koopa tribe, who are led by the evil King Koopa, who would later be named Bowser in America. This tribe of turtles use magic to change the mushroom people into stones, bricks, and field horsehair plants. Anyway, Mario hears about everything happening and runs off to save Princess Toadstool, who is kidnapped by King Koopa, and you all know the rest. Your princess is in another castle, rinse and repeat 8 times, and you save the day. But maybe this story wasn't so simple, with it being implied that the bricks you're smashing the whole game are transformed mushroom people. This theory has been discussed all over YouTube, so I won't add to the speculation. So our boy Miyamoto was also in charge of Super Mario Bros. Alongside Takashi Tezuka, with their goal being to create a game that has the character traverse through many lands with different themes, like land, water, and sky. The team would plan out the levels on graph paper, drawing out each scenario over tons of paper before sending them over to programming to implement digitally. And due to the success of the Mario Bros. Arcade game, they chose Mario to star in this ambitious adventure title. Looking at all this from an origin story perspective, and this order of events is somewhat debated, the events of Yoshi's Island definitely takes place first, with Mario and Luigi originally being from the Mushroom Kingdom. At some point, he and Luigi pack up and go to New York to make it big in the big city, doing odd jobs like carpentry and plumbing to make ends meet. Mario eventually gets a girlfriend known as Pauline until a giant Donkey Kong kidnaps her and takes her to the top of the construction site, where Mario saves the day and traps Donkey Kong in a cage to stop him from harming anyone else. Donkey Kong Jr. sees his papa in danger and battles against Mario to save him, successfully doing so as the two escape with their lives. Now, what happens to these two is a story for another day. Mario and Luigi continue their various handyman work until they hear about the Koopa takeover in the Mushroom Kingdom and decide to move back to help out the princess with her plight, forever becoming heroes in the Mushroom Kingdom. Now, there isn't much out there to prove this order of events. Normally, I didn't even consider the original Donkey Kong games to be canon to Mario's whole timeline. But then a game called Super Mario Odyssey released for the Nintendo Switch in 2017, and that changed my entire perspective on this. The story involves Mario going after Bowser and his minions to stop Princess Peach from being forced to marry him. Mario befriends a Cap friend from the Cap Kingdom named Cappy, who takes him on his ship, also known as the Odyssey, as they travel the world in chase of Bowser. All this aside, there is one level in particular known as the Metro Kingdom, with its main location to explore being New Donk City, which has all the trims and trappings of New York City, complete with buildings inspired by most famous buildings like the Empire State and the Chrysler Building. To make things even more interesting, Pauline, Mario's ex-girlfriend at this point of the series, has become the mayor of New Donk City. So throughout this stage, you're helping Pauline finish setting up for the New Donk City Festival, and imagine my surprise when the entire festival is this huge homage to the events of the original Donkey Kong. This whole stage heavily implies that Mario once lived in New Donk City, where he originally saved Pauline from the clutches of Donkey Kong. So I think at some point Nintendo originally envisioned Mario as a New Yorker, but to make the Mario world a little more cohesive, they brought in New Donk City as a replacement to address Mario's life before Super Mario Bros. So while there's nothing from Nintendo out there to fully confirm this, it does make telling Mario's story a little bit simpler. And I know there's an entire series called Mario vs. Donkey Kong that I'm missing in this somewhat, but the story is more or less inconsequential. It does bring Mario, Pauline, and Donkey Kong back into one game, but it's not really worth mentioning to the overall origins of Mario. So that's the origin story for Mario in the mainline games. I know I haven't touched on the spin-off RPGs or the Paper Mario series, which I believe takes place up in a book, so that might be just a completely alternate dimension. I know I have to look more into that. But with the mainline games, the plot doesn't stray too far from the damsel in distress approach, and I believe this is intentionally done by Nintendo. It's safe to say, much like Sega has done with Sonic, Nintendo wants to keep things simple and focus on refreshing new adventures for this plumber with each new game that comes out. But we'll have to wait and see what the newest Mario movie plans to bring to the table.
Okay.
Now you die.
I finally found it. Now who's gonna stop me?
King Koopa here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like the Koopa special.
So as I discussed in the first Mario Origin video, Mario has had quite a few appearances before Nintendo finally settled into the Super Mario Bros. Series. The first Super Mario Bros. Game released in 1985 for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and would debut Mario's transition into an action platformer, pitting him against the great demon King Koopa, who's kidnapped Princess Toadstool of the Mushroom Kingdom. The name Bowser is actually his localized name for Western audiences, with his name simply being Koopa in Japan, which oddly enough was the name that they went with in the famous 1993 live-action adaptation, considering they changed everything else.
King Koopa here.
Oh, yes, sir.
I'd like the Koopa special.
Pterodactyl tail on that?
Yes. Dino, lizard, hold a mammal, no worms, and spicy.
Anyway, we're introduced to Bowser as the leader of the Koopas, who use their black magic to transform the people of the Mushroom Kingdom into stones, bricks, and field horsehair plants, objects that we see scattered throughout the game. And I'm gonna assume that the Magic Koopas or Kamek were behind this, even if they didn't debut these enemies until Super Mario World. But seeing as they can transform blocks into enemies, I'll assume they can do the opposite. So Mario has to save the princess from Bowser so she can undo the spell on the Mushroom people, and as I'm talking about it, I would love to see Nintendo just remake the first game to address all this lore. I know we're tired of remakes in video games at this point, but I need Mario and Sonic to straighten out their backstories.
Why does it exist? Who asked for this? Who said yes? Who needs to be held responsible?
So as Mario tears through each world, you have to brave one of Bowser's castles in the 4th level of each world, fighting him on a bridge over hot lava at the end of each castle. And what I never noticed is that all Bowsers you take on before World 8 are actually fake Bowsers. Yeah, every king needs some decoys out there, I guess, and I'm surprised Princess Peach has never tried this, seeing how often she gets kidnapped. Mentalk from the future here. Thank you to the comments section for reminding me that Peach does try the decoy thing in Mario and Luigi Superstar Saga. She replaces herself with Birdo, but she does get kidnapped later in the game, so I guess this didn't work out so well for her. But all that aside, the developers implemented this idea by accident when one of the programmers mistakenly inserted an upside-down Koopa Troopa shell when Bowser was initially defeated. They ended up liking this idea of him having stand-ins instead, and the idea stuck. So if you take him out with a fire flower, you'll see the enemy that was transformed turn back to normal before falling off screen. Normally I just beat this by taking down the bridge instead, which is probably why I never noticed, because you won't see the enemy turn back to normal when you take that route. Anyway, once Mario defeats the real Bowser at the end of the game, this character is solidified as his main arch nemesis, returning for every mainline Super Mario title from that point on, except the US version of Super Mario Bros. 2, but that's a different story entirely. But what exactly are Koopas? So when Super Mario Bros. Was initially localized, the Western translations mistook the name Koopa as the name of the entire tribe that Bowser commands, and from that point on they used the name to collectively refer to these turtles. But in Japan they are known as Kame Ichizoku, which roughly translates to the turtle tribe. So of course, most of the enemies that Mario faces in this series are part of the Koopa tribe, with different types of Koopas serving different purposes. And just to add to this confusion, Koopa is only used to refer to Bowser in Japan as well. So all the localized versions that we see here is a result of those initial mistranslations. Anyway, the most common Koopas that we see are the Koopa Troopas, but there are others such as Boom Boom, Hammer Bros, Lackey 2s, and Yoshis?
No way!
Yeah, this is true. Yoshis can be considered Koopas, but I gotta leave something interesting for my eventual Yoshi video, so we'll get to that some other time. But Bowser seems to be a part of his own species of Koopa, with most of the members of his lineage being considered part of a royal family. But sit tight, before we get to his royal bloodline, we gotta check out what our boy Miyamoto was thinking when he came up with Bowser as a villain. When I start getting sponsors, this is probably the section where I'd talk to you about Raid Shadow Legends, but you know, we're not there yet, so moving along. This is the earliest known concept art for Bowser, which looks a lot like a normal Koopa Troopa. And during this phase, Miyamoto would name him Boss Creeper, derived from the name Shell Creeper, one of the turtle enemies that we see running around the sewers of New York in the Mario Bros. Game. But the name Boss Creeper didn't stick around for long, as they came up with 3 other possible names: Koopa, Yuke, and Bibimba. Bibimba?
Bibimba.
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 Baby Bop.
Yes.
Which are the Japanese pronunciations of popular Korean dishes. Due to the time constraints, Miyamoto would go on to draw the box art for Super Mario Bros. Himself, depicting Bowser with grayish skin instead. And I would honestly love for this to become a totally different enemy in a future Mario game.
Who asked for this?
Just thinking out loud here, Nintendo. Miyamoto drew some inspiration for the character from the antagonist Ox Demon King from the anime adaptation of Journey to the West, hence some of his features loosely resembling an ox. And if you're not familiar with Journey to the West, that's an old Chinese tale that's very popular in Japanese culture and influenced a lot of characters and plot themes in anime and games alike, the most popular version of this being Dragon Ball. It wasn't until further discussion and involvement from other artists that they would fully plan out Bowser's final design for the Mario series, with them going fully turtle based on the features of the Koopa Troopas that already existed. So their main artist, Yoichi Kotabe, decided to take inspiration from an aggressive species of turtle, the Chinese softshell turtle.
Whoa!
I'm not seeing the resemblance. But apparently this asshole of a turtle is what was used to create the Bowser that we know today. And we see that Bowser has ruled over the Koopas from the earliest point in the Mario timeline, with a baby version of himself being featured in Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. This game still remains as the earliest Mario game chronologically, unless otherwise stated, with Baby Bowser serving as the main antagonist and final boss. Yoshi serves as the babysitter for Baby Mario for a majority of the game, as he and the other Yoshis attempt to save his brother Luigi and get both children safely back on their way to their parents via this stork that was also kidnapped. And on the other hand, Kamek here serves as Baby Bowser's caretaker, and is the cause of most of the mishaps in this game in the first place, kidnapping Luigi and the stork since he foresees the Mario brothers becoming a problem for them later on. And boy was Kamek here right, way ahead of his time. Also in this game, we see Baby Bowser at the very end wanting to ride the Green Donkey before it transitions into the final boss fight, which serves as Mario and Bowser's very first scrap. Yoshi and Mario are victorious with Kamek and Baby Bowser flying off to fight another day. We'd see them again in Yoshi's Island DS, where a bunch of babies from the Mushroom Kingdom are kidnapped by Bowser from the future. His plan is to find the 7-star children and use their power to become the ruler of this universe. So these children include, of course, Baby Mario, Luigi, Peach, DK, Wario, Bowser, and a newborn Yoshi. This game honestly doesn't make much sense continuity-wise, but Bowser isn't even kind to his past self, which ends up with Baby Bowser joining Yoshi and the rest of the babies to stop Bowser. You'd think you'd remember the moment where your older self came back from the future and terrorized you so you would stop yourself from doing it in the future.
Man, f them kids, bro.
Anyway, so once they get back to Bowser's castle, Baby Bowser gets into a little spat with Wario, who wants his treasure, which causes some friction amongst the babies. So Baby Bowser turns on them and stays with Kamek and his future self instead, while the other babies square up with a future Bowser and try to stop him from kidnapping all of the babies again. Which brings into question Bowser's lineage. Is he a straight up orphan in this game, with Kamek biding their time until he's a fully grown king? Well, while Nintendo doesn't seem to want to discuss this much, I did manage to track down one time where this is addressed. Nintendo had a comic book series published back in the 90s called Nintendo Comic System, overseen by Valiant Comics. And these books had several shorts that included popular Nintendo characters from series like Donkey Kong, Mario, and The Legend of Zelda. In one particular issue known as Bedtime for Drainhead, Bowser kidnaps Toad at the beginning of the comic and mentions to Toad that he hopes to see his father on Kingdom's Most Wanted, a television program in their world. Now, I know this is probably a throwaway line for the writers of this comic, but it does imply that his father is on the run, which, depending on when this happened exactly, could totally fit into the lore of the games if Nintendo wanted to go that route. I'm just saying, Nintendo, I would love to see a game about the Bowser family reunion.
Who asked?
We also see Bowser's mother in some non-canon material like the Super Mario Bros. Super Show that ran back in 1989. And much like Dr. Robotnik's mom in The Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog, they just took Bowser and put a wig, dress, and heels on her and called her his mother. But we also see a tiny cameo of Bowser's mother as a librarian in the PC version of Mario's Time Machine Deluxe.
I'm Bowser's mother and the librarian of this magnificent library. Bowser has been spending a lot of time here lately. I hope you find something of interest.
Cool.
So those are the only mentions of Bowser's parents, but did you all know that he's also implied to have a brother?
No.
Or he was, since Nintendo and Miyamoto love to flip-flop when it comes to the details about the Mario series. So in Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, aka Super Mario Bros. 2 in Japan, you take on a color-swapped Bowser imposter in level 8-4. He has a bluish color instead of green, but also throws hammers and breathes fire, much like the real Bowser boss fight in the original Super Mario Bros. And if you defeat him with fireballs, he just dies as is, no minions, no stand-ins. So whoever this guy is, this is definitely his true form. The identity of this particular fake Bowser seems to have caused Nintendo some stress, since there are multiple ways he's been described. Like in the original Japanese guide for Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels, this blue Bowser is only referred to as a fake. But in other books released in the 90s that had direct collaboration with Nintendo, like the Complete Super Mario Great Encyclopedia, roughly translated, the same fake Bowser is called the first of Bowser's brothers. In another book called the Super Mario Bros. Daizukan, or Great Picture Book, it states, in Mario 2, Bowser's little brother was a strong enemy who had the same strength as Bowser's body doubles. Now, based on all this material, it's hard to figure out who came up with this idea first, or if this was the original intention for this fake by Nintendo themselves, but this entire color swap was completely removed when Super Mario All-Stars version of the original games were released for the Super Nintendo, swapping the estranged brother out with the real Bowser instead. And I'd like to think that since we never saw this version of Bowser again, Mario literally murdered Bowser's brother in Super Mario Bros. 2 for Japan. I mean, what other explanation could there be? And then maybe Nintendo of Japan just didn't like the implications and just removed the idea of Bowser having a brother in the first place. I'm just thinking out loud here. I could go on and on about Bowser's supposed family, like the Koopalings, who were definitely introduced originally as his children, until Miyamoto-san said he wasn't down for that anymore. Probably because it brought with it too many questions about Bowser that he didn't want to address. So now they're officially just a set of Bowser's minions and nothing else, with Miyamoto stating in a 2012 interview that the current story is that the 7 Koopalings are not Bowser's children. So funny enough, in Smash 4, when you activate Palutena's guidance as Pit, they mention the relationship between them and Bowser being a mystery.
The relationship between Bowser and the Koopalings is a real mystery.
I kind of feel bad for them.
That's sweet of you, but not very conducive to taking them down, kid.
And I'd like to think that's Sakurai himself joking around with Miyamoto about not having any idea what the Koopalings are supposed to be. Anyway, as of 2022, Bowser has one child, and his name is Bowser Jr., first appearing in Super Mario Sunshine, released for the Nintendo GameCube in 2002. Okay, so let's get back to Bowser himself. We'd see Bowser pretty much serving as the antagonist for the mainline games, kidnapping the princess and picking fights with Mario with his latest and greatest plan. It doesn't really get more complex than that, but I will have to mention his role in most of the Mario RPG games that we've gotten over the years, and I'd argue his more charming qualities were derived from the writing in those particular games. The very first time we see this is in the famous Super Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars for the Super Nintendo, and for once a new antagonist steps up to the plate, named Smithy, who at the very beginning of the game takes over Bowser's castle that would serve as his base of operations. As Mario ventures to collect the 7 stars to defeat Smithy and his men, he would in fact run into Bowser, who wants to reclaim his castle, and Bowser does the unthinkable in the process. Teams up with Mario for the very first time. Yeah, so this was unheard of at the time, which honestly one of the reasons why Super Mario RPG was so cool is we get to see Bowser from another perspective. And he also gives the player the middle finger after winning each battle, so that's awesome. But don't worry, that was changed in the US version, so us American kids missed out on that. We'd continue to see Nintendo explore Bowser's character even further with other story-driven Mario games like the Mario and Luigi series and Paper Mario, but if you truly want a game that explores this character, look no further than Mario and Luigi: Bowser's Inside Story. This game originally released for the Nintendo DS back in 2009, but since then we got an enhanced version released for the 3DS, which even includes a Bowser Jr. side story. And I can only hope we get a similar game that puts Bowser in the spotlight again. While the plot doesn't dive into Bowser's origins or anything like that, I wanted to mention it since you get to experience the entire plot with Bowser as the protagonist. After being tricked into eating a vacuum shroom by the antagonist of the game, Fawful, Bowser swallows everything in sight while at Peach's castle, and this has Mario and Luigi, unbeknownst by Bowser, stuck inside his body for a majority of the game. The brothers will have to manipulate parts of his body to keep Bowser alive in dangerous situations while he goes after Fawful. And plot aside, we experience the whole story as Bowser and get to see a day in the life from his perspective. And I think this is one of the best written versions of Bowser out there, as we get to see how he runs his kingdom and the extent of his power. Alright, so what other versions of Bowser are out there? Well, aside from the games, there's a ton of media for Mario, like a long-running manga called Mario-kun, a few anime adaptations, and a few cartoons from the late 80s and early 90s with different versions of the character. And while Bowser is involved with many of these, I wanted to highlight a few that would do something with the character other than just being a villain. We'll save the other media for the Mario Part 2 video, coming to my channel after months of stalling.
The lie detector determined that was a lie.
But first is a Japanese exclusive anime film from 1986 called Super Mario Bros. Peach Hime Kyushutsu Saksen, which translates roughly to The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach. This would be another interpretation of the original game, but the first issue, I have to point out, is that they gave Peach a fiancé. Unacceptable. Anyway, a VHS of this 1 hour special is actually one of the rarest pieces of Mario merchandise out there, which not only stars Toru Furuya as Mario, who is famous for playing Tuxedo Mask from Sailor Moon and Sabo from One Piece, but also features Bowser's first voiced role. And that was not the voice I was expecting. Anyway, Bowser's role in this is very similar to the first game, as he attempts to conquer the kingdom while turning everyone into objects. But one major difference between this animation and the game is that we see Bowser interested in marrying Princess Peach, which apparently would mark the very first time he's shown being in love with her. So if this animation brought any influence to the mainline games, it's that characterization where Bowser is trying to marry Princess Peach. Meanwhile, on the Western side of things, we had all these cartoons made by a company called DIC. The Mario franchise had 3 shows produced by DIC Entertainment, which had frequent appearances from Bowser himself, exploring his latest schemes. There was the Super Mario Bros. Super Show, followed up by the Adventures of Super Mario Bros. 3, and finally, the Super Mario World television series. And I think if you grew up around that time, you would have seen this show somewhere on TV, or if you're from the early 2000s, maybe you saw scenes from this show in a YouTube poop somewhere.
Mama? Mama Luigi?
But the one in particular I want to cover is a totally different beast known as King Koopa's Cool Cartoons. This is 1K away from being racist. A live-action show starring Bowser that aired for 1 season in late 1989. And yeah, they figured this would be a great idea. I'm surprised I haven't heard of many people who are scared of this thing, considering how terrible this costume looks. This show had a format that would start with a recorded introduction, followed by Bowser hosting in front of a live audience of kids. And I would talk a little bit about this intro, but I think that you need to see it for yourself. Why? Sometimes when I'm looking at anything from the early 90s, it feels like I'm peering into a different dimension. And I lived through those times. Anyway, King Koopa here would spend the time reading fan mail and giving quizzes to viewers who would send their responses into the show through the mail. Surprisingly, the show had high ratings and viewership, but of course, ran into its fair share of hiccups. The first actor that played Koopa, Christopher Collins, started yelling at the children in the live audience that got into an altercation with his son, who was also present. On-point characterization aside, he was fired and replaced with Pat Piney, or is this Penny?
Penny.
I'm gonna go with Penny, which caused him to be heckled for not being the same actor by other children that joined the audience.
Man, them kids, bro.
So as you can imagine, the show was pulled after 1 season as parents didn't seem to be big fans of it. There's an excellent video by Thomas Game Docs that came out recently discussing this show in more detail that you should definitely check out if you want to hear more. But honestly, after talking about this show, the 1993 live-action movie doesn't seem nearly as bad. And this cult classic could totally get a video of its own, but I need to talk about Dennis Hopper's version of the Koopa King.
Larry Lazard of Lazard, Conda, Dactyl, and Cohen.
So as you all know, this movie has nothing to do with the games aside from names and some themes from the games, like the Mario Bros being plumbers, a princess existing, a King Koopa, and... If you're ever curious as to why Nintendo even let this happen, it's because Mario was so popular that they thought anything would stick. Yeah, essentially the producer of the film walked into Nintendo of America headquarters with a script and they were like, "Hey, where's the freaking gabagoo?" Okay, sure, let's do it, as long as we get profits from the merch. You motherfucker. I'm simplifying that story quite a bit, but the point is Nintendo really didn't care. And apparently Oscar-winning screenwriter Barry Morrow wrote a script for the original concept for this movie that one of their co-producers scrapped since it was a more serious drama rather than a comedy. And I would love to peer into the dimension where that movie was released instead. So speaking of dimensions, the plot was actually about the Earth splitting into two different dimensions after the big meteor that crashed 65 million years ago. So one dimension is where dinosaurs thrived, and the other is our world where mammals and eventually humans thrived. And Mario and Luigi are plumbers from Brooklyn, New York, and after a ton of exposition and meeting Princess Daisy who gets kidnapped, they pursue her through an interdimensional portal to the dinosaur version of Earth, ending up in a city called Dino-Hatton, which is a ridiculous name until you realize Dino-Hatton, Manhattan. Anyway, these brothers go through a ton of hijinks in this foreign dimension to save Daisy, who premiered in Super Mario Land for the Game Boy. Which is fine, I guess, it's not the biggest sin this movie committed, but let's talk about the man of the hour, King Koopa. The script for this movie is horrendous, but Dennis Hopper sells this role in a very typical 90s villain fashion.
Foil, lethal, stupid.
He is absolutely nothing like the in-game Bowser, but to give him some credit, there wasn't much to go off of in 1993, because the latest game at the time was Super Mario World. But in the movie, his whole goal is to use a piece of the original meteor that split the dimensions to somehow merge them back together so he could rule both worlds. Now, humor me for a sec. How do you do that if they merge into one world though? If the two worlds merged, what would happen to Dino-Hatton and Manhattan? Would they implode on each other? Would one win out? Would that happen for the entire world? How would the Earth suddenly sustain twice the population? You're talking about a situation 100 times worse than the Thanos snap, because Marvel doesn't even explore how bad everyone returning from that snap at one time might have been. Hi, it's me from the future again. So just as a quick clarification, I watched the movie recently and Dino-Hatton is surrounded by an endless desert. Either way, the whole world merging thing isn't explained too well in the movie, so just wanted to add that detail in there. Okay, thanks, bye. But this is even harder to fathom, imagining two established worlds merging together like that. This Koopa guy has a few scales loose in my opinion, but how could you not love scenes like this?
Goomba! Walk tall! Be proud! Go Goomba!
Imagine a world where Super Mario is a realistic action game starring Chris Pratt.
It's a me, a Mario.
So as I mentioned in the last video, a lot of Mario's past is seeped within the world of Donkey Kong before he was given his own adventures in the Mushroom Kingdom. Way before the release of Super Mario Bros. Was a show called Saturday Supercade.
Saturday Supercade, gather round, we'll get your video friends together. Yes, Saturday Supercade is time for fun, and no one else can do it better.
Which ran for 2 seasons from 1983 to 1984 on Saturday mornings. It featured several separate segments that included popular video game characters at the time like Frogger, Q*bert, and of course, Donkey Kong. And in this Donkey Kong portion of the show, Mario and Pauline were frequently featured as they attempt to catch the ape after he escaped from the circus. This would actually be the very first animated adaptation of Mario to be released to the world, and I suppose this design could be a lot worse.
What is that?
Mario here is the assumed owner of the circus, which is probably a direct reference to Donkey Kong Circus for the Game & Watch. And I think the coolest part of this show is that Mario is voiced by none other than Peter Cullen, the definitive voice of Optimus Prime, and that cool-ass narrator from Toonami back in the day.
Dragon Ball. Weekdays at 5:30.
I miss my childhood. Okay, let's move on before I make this video about Toonami. It's crazy to think that this cartoon predates the first Super Mario Bros. Game too, so this show is lacking a lot of things that make Mario Mario. But despite this, we would see Mario, Pauline, and Donkey Kong stumbling upon random criminals throughout these segments, causing their plans to be thwarted since they're caught in the middle of Mario's hunt for DK. And Saturday Supercade is another one of those historical TV shows that was never released in a digital format. It seems debatable on who owns the rights to this show at this point in time, since most of the companies that produced the series or owned it in the past are more or less defunct. So the Donkey Kong segments are said to be currently owned by Nintendo of America, but I kind of think it's a fat chance that they would re-release it at this stage of the game.
It'll be a while before he comes back.
The next time we'd see Mario in an animation would be Super Mario Bros. Peach Hime Kyutsudai Saksen.
This motherfucker don't miss.
Or The Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach, which I covered in the origin video for Bowser, so you should definitely check that out if you have a chance. It was a short animated film released exclusively in Japan around 1986 as a tie-in to the Japanese Super Mario Bros. 2. And it would be the first set of media that made a story adaptation of the first Super Mario Bros. Game. It was produced by animation team Grouper Studio, known for these classic anime titles such as The Ping Pong Club and Yosei Dick. I have no idea what these are. They did make a Karopi movie at some point though, and at least I recognize that character. Anyway, Great Mission to Rescue Princess Peach is a pretty rare item to track down these days, so for my VHS fanatics out there,
good luck.
I find the first scene of this movie to be pretty interesting, as they portray Mario as being from another world. He's literally just sitting in his living room playing Nintendo until Peach decides to drag him into her mess and requests his protection from Bowser. Now, if you were a damsel in distress running from this giant Koopa King and could just leap into other worlds like this, would you pick the guy sitting in his room in a rocking chair playing video games to come save you? I mean, he does, but that's beside the point. Anyway, Mario completely simps for Peach and promises to help her before she gets kidnapped by Bowser and dragged back into the Mushroom Kingdom. And plot twist, Peach is engaged.
What?
Uh-oh, Mario, you're being finessed.
Oh no, he's hot!
So we find out that Mario and Luigi work at a grocery store in this movie, so strangely enough, there's no mention of the plumber thing in this particular movie. Mario isn't even that good at his job. He completely ignores this irate customer because he's daydreaming about Peach the whole time. So I also mentioned Peach's fiance. It's actually a dude named Kibidango who has been turned into a dog and gets the Mario Bros to follow him down a pipe into the Mushroom Kingdom, setting the stage for their adventure. And from there, the movie plays out pretty much like a Mario game, with Mario and Luigi outsmarting several of Bowser's minions on their way to rescue Princess Peach. And there are a few details that would also be implemented into the games later on, like Bowser wanting to marry Princess Peach, which we wouldn't truly see mentioned before Paper Mario. Another small detail is Peach is depicted with blonde hair, when most of the time she was shown having brown hair in a lot of these animations. So let's see if they eventually decide to bring back her fiance here. I think that would settle a lot of debates in the Mario community for a while. I have to wonder if some of these elements are also going to be carrying over into the upcoming Mario movie, but I guess we'll see when the time comes. Before I move on from this film, I do have to mention the ridiculous amount of merchandise that was released for it. Aside from the VHS tape itself, there was an art book, a riddle book, a picture book, a vinyl for the song Doki Doki Do It that was on the movie's soundtrack, a vinyl record for the entire soundtrack, and even a tie-in manga for the movie itself. All of these are pretty rare, by the way, so if you're a Mario collector, get to work and show me the goods on Twitter or Discord if you manage to procure any of these.
Toonami gives Super Mario Sunshine for the GameCube a 10 out of 10. Nice work, Mr. Mario.
Alright, let's move on to the next set of cartoons that are probably the most popular for the Western market back in the day.
Dick.
Yes, the Deke cartoons. I think this was the set of Mario cartoons that truly ingrained the idea of the Mario Brothers being plumbers from Brooklyn. The first one to be released was the cult classic Super Mario Bros. Super Show, starring former wrestler Lou Albano as Mario and the late Danny Wells as Luigi, portraying the two living their lives in Brooklyn in their Mario Brothers plumbing basement workshop. This is actually the show that would first establish Mario's full name being Mario Mario, which Nintendo would later confirm being his true name back in 2015. The show released in September 1989 and was a hybrid of live action and animation, with the live action segments being used to open the show, followed by a cartoon based on the video games pitting Mario, Luigi, and Peach against King Koopa. These cartoons would be more or less what you'd expect, containing small stories within each episode with zany adventures involving Mario and Luigi after being swallowed down the bath drain to end up in the Mushroom Kingdom. On the other hand, the live-action segments would feature a slice of life with Mario and Luigi, having guest stars and celebrities popping into their workshop for a grand time.
In that case,
The continuity between the live segments and the cartoon segments aren't exactly clear, but I guess you could say the live-action parts could serve as a prequel to their adventures in the Mushroom Kingdom, or it could be their lives after they've returned to Brooklyn. People are speculating a lot of inspiration for the upcoming Super Mario Bros. Movie will come from this show, featuring the Mario brothers as plumbers from Brooklyn. Super Mario Bros. Super Show had 2 fully animated follow-up shows, The Adventures of Super Mario Bros. 3 and Super Mario World, both shows based on their respective games. But for these, they completely removed the live-action portion from the show and just did small animated stories instead, fitting in 2 segments per episode. But this is the Men Talk channel, I can't just leave it there. I wanted to take a look at the Danish dub of this show. Yeah, they actually produced new live-action segments with Mario and Luigi, broadcasting them around the animated segments much like the Super Mario Bros. Super Show. Lennart Johannesson and Jorn Rosenville portrayed Mario and Luigi respectively, and they had a great deal of success in Denmark playing the roles, but unfortunately videos of these segments are more or less lost. Believe me, I tried to hunt this down, and if any of you can find it, leave a comment for me below. Okay, so here we are 3 months later, still haven't been able to find footage from the Danish version, but the comment section did tell me about a Korean dub, and I managed to find video of that. So shout out to the actors Kim Ui-won as Mario and Kim Jong-guk as Luigi, and I know I probably butchered the pronunciation, but I gave it my best shot. Meanwhile, on the other side of the world in Japan, Mario would have a series of animated stories being produced that are collectively known as the Amada anime series, released back in 1989. It's a set of animations that are based on classic Japanese folk tales and fairy tales, with the characters being replaced by the Mario cast as stand-ins. First is Super Mario Momotaro, which famously depicts Mario holding Bowser at gunpoint.
Okay, come about them pockets!
This animation is inspired by the Japanese fairy tale Momotaro, and it opens with Princess Peach and her parents living happily on some floating island in space. Seeing they made her parents 2 Hammer Bros, I have to wonder why they didn't just choose Toads instead. Okay, let's not think too hard about that. Bowser gets word of her beauty and kidnaps her to make her his bride. And with Peach's parents devastated, a shooting star one day lands at their feet, revealing a giant Peach. And yeah, I'm sure you saw this coming, but baby Mario pops out of this thing and is adopted by Peach's parents. So some time passes and the rapidly growing Mario overhears about Peach being in captivity and heads off on this adventure to save her from Bowser's clutches, which leads to your boy being restrained and held at gunpoint. The next animation is Super Mario Isunboshi, based on the Japanese folktale of the same name. Similar to Momotaro, this starts with a shooting star giving a couple a child they wished for, which would again be Mario, though he seems to be only an inch tall in this case. But he grows up with a thirst for adventure. Funny enough, we see parental figures that kind of resemble Mario here, even though we don't see their actual faces. So Mario sets out on this journey to a city beyond the mountains, which leads him to Princess Peach. And they grow fond of each other and spend a lot of time together, with Mario sitting on Peach's shoulder most of the time. Of course, we can't let this end without Bowser swooping in to try and marry Peach. This of course leads to a fight with Tiny Mario and Bowser. Bowser even tries to swallow Mario, but Mario starts stabbing him from the inside out with his sword. This causes Bowser to spit him out because he can't take the agony anymore, but Mario continues to mutilate him and cuts off his horns and eyebrows. Luckily, Bowser manages to escape, leaving Mario and Peach to live happily ever after. But the story doesn't fully end there. Peach uses a wish-granting hammer that Bowser dropped to make a full-sized Mario. Cool. The last animation in this collection is Super Mario Shirayuki Hime, which is basically just a retelling of Snow White. Just imagine the same story, with Peach as Snow White, Queen Koopa as the evil queen, Toads as the 7 dwarves, and Mario as the random prince. Though I guess Nintendo didn't want him to actually kiss Peach to awaken her here, he uses a random potion to wake her up. Sorry Mario, I'm pretty sure you're friend-zoned by now. This animation actually gets pretty crazy though, with Mario storming Queen Koopa's castle and backing her into a corner, forcing her to hold a knife to Peach's throat in desperation. But if that's not enough, Luigi actually saves the day here by hitting Koopa over the head with a hammer and then kicking her in the stomach. But that's not enough for these brothers though, they want blood. So they toss her ass into the magic mirror and everybody laughs their ass off while the queen's bleeding out on the floor.
Yeah!
Oh, shit.
Mario would actually go on to have another original film created in Japan in '91, this time by Bandai, Super Mario World Mario and Yoshi's Adventureland, an interactive anime based around Super Mario World. Now, Mario's origins aren't any different in this particular film, but I thought the technology here was interesting enough to mention. So the film was designed to be used with Bandai's Terebico system. The Terebico was a console designed around interacting with VHS tapes, released in 1988 in Japan. It was the shape of a phone, which would be connected to the audio output jack of the TV, allowing the player to respond to questions via the telephone. It didn't exactly have the biggest library, and I imagine it was probably expensive to make interactive videos for this thing, but it did have some pretty big names on it like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, Hello Kitty, and of course Mario himself. In this 28-minute interactive video, Mario and Luigi get a postcard from Princess Peach, encouraging them to join her over on Dinosaur Land. While on the plane, Mario would test out his phone to call the player before landing at the airport. And there they would learn that Bowser has already taken Princess Peach captive, kickstarting the adventure to rescue her. The player would then use the telephone to answer prompts to assist Mario and Luigi in overcoming enemies and traps throughout Dinosaur Land. I love old gaming tech like this, though most of these have a history of failing. But if you're interested in hearing about a similar device from Sega called the Sega Pico, the original stylus console before the Nintendo DS, I made a whole video on that too if you want to check that out. Last but not least, I want to talk about Super Mario-kun. I had no idea this comic existed until I made the first Mario Origins video, but this is a highly successful manga in Japan that details the adventures of Mario, detailing his adventures from several games like Super Mario World and even Paper Mario. This comic started all the way back in 1990 as a monthly release, with the first volume covering the events of Super Mario World. The art style is definitely a little different, but this is more or less supposed to be the same Mario we see in the video games. A lot of these stories include events that aren't fully covered in the games, but get this, they are still releasing Mario-kun volumes to this day. Coming up on December 3rd, 2022, they have a set of comics detailing the events of Paper Mario, the Origami King, Bowser's Fury, and Mario Golf Super Rush. So maybe I should do a live reading of some of these on stream sometime. It'd be cool to take a look at all the extra details they throw into these stories that we may not see in game.
Machine gun.
Nintendo.
Princess Peach, the princess in another castle, the driving force behind many of Mario's adventures. First appearing in Super Mario Bros. Releasing for the Nintendo Entertainment System in 1985. She'd be introduced as the kidnapped princess of the Mushroom Kingdom, who Mario must save so she can properly restore the damage done by Bowser and his minions during their hostile takeover. Now, before we continue, I know some of my casual gamers out there might be thinking about the original damsel in distress that we see in Donkey Kong at the top of the construction site. So for those unfamiliar with the early stages of the series, this character is named Pauline, originally dubbed Mario's girlfriend during the events of Donkey Kong. So while I'm sure this particular character later inspired the creation of Princess Peach to a certain degree, they're totally separate, and Pauline herself had quite the reintroduction as mayor of New Donk City in 2017's Super Mario Odyssey. And wow, look at that, it's already been 5 years since this game came out. Sheesh. Anyway, I have a full breakdown of Mario's origins on the channel already if you'd like to hear more about her. So with that out of the way, what are the origins of Princess Peach? Well, not much backstory is given on Peach here in the original Super Mario Bros. There's surprisingly a decent amount of story given within the instructions booklet for the game, detailing the takeover of the peaceful kingdom of mushroom people by the invading Koopa tribe. So everyone is turned into bricks and stones, which only Princess Peach herself can reverse. But the problem here is that she's kidnapped by Bowser and tucked away in a castle that Mario and Luigi struggle to find the entire game. This is all pretty straightforward, but there is one detail from the instructions booklet for this game that has thoroughly piqued my interest. Mushroom King. Who is this man, and why have we never seen his face in the games before?
Some business came up I gotta handle. So we're gonna have to put our trip on hold.
So more specifically, in the English translation of the Super Mario Bros. Plot, it refers to Peach as the daughter of the Mushroom King, though this king is not mentioned at all in the original Japanese text. But with that said, Peach does have a father that was referenced in a few different types of media before Nintendo completely wiped the presence of Peach's family from existence. Aside from the English manual, he'd also be referenced in the 1987 official Nintendo Player's Guide, with the plot summary for Super Mario Bros. Describing the Mushroom Kingdom as a peaceful kingdom ruled by a good king and queen. Another guide that was licensed by Nintendo called How to Win at Super Mario Bros. Not only references the Mushroom King, but also has a picture of him beside the story. He'd also be featured in the Nintendo Comics System series published by Valiant Comics in the early 1990s, which features various comic strips of different Nintendo series like Mario and The Legend of Zelda. I guess a lot of these auxiliary books assume that there would be a king or queen ruling over, the Mushroom Kingdom.
Man, shut your
There was even some speculation for a while that Toadsworth, Peach's trusted advisor introduced in Super Mario Sunshine, was her relative. At one point, the Super Mario Sunshine and Mario and Luigi Partners in Time website stated that he was Peach's father. But this contradicts what's been stated in the games, with Toadsworth being just her subordinate. Speaking of which, I haven't seen Toadsworth in a while. I think maybe Nintendo may have killed him off in Bowser's last attack on the Mushroom Kingdom. Anyway, within the games themselves, we'll say that King Toadstool is either long dead or just never existed until Nintendo says otherwise. Despite the status of the Mushroom Monarchy here, we'll return to Super Mario Bros., where Mario and Luigi manage to track down Bowser and end his war campaign, saving Princess Peach in the process, which makes the two the official heroes of the Mushroom Kingdom from that point on. So with that established as the plot, let's take a step back here and see what Miyamoto was thinking when he designed this iconic princess.
Hold on.
Peach's design was drafted by Shigeru Miyamoto, the creator of Mario himself, with some help in part by Yoichi Kotabe, the former primary artist of the Mario series at Nintendo. You can thank Kotabe-san for the finalized designs of Peach, Mario, and Bowser, and personally, I think this style is some of the best artwork for the series up to this point. Her original design is more or less intact to this day, her hair being blonde in color while sporting the iconic pink dress. And many limitations on the NES forced Nintendo to make a few concessions with her color scheme in the final product, with her hair appearing reddish brown and dress white with red trimmings. Now, for my Sonic fans, this next part might actually sound familiar to you if you've ever been involved in the Robotnik versus Eggman debate.
I'm gonna be on TV!
In Japan, Princess Peach was in fact her name from the very beginning. But in the West, she would be localized as Princess Toadstool by Nintendo of America to keep her more in tune with the theme of the Mushroom Kingdom. This would later be changed in Super Mario 64 to match her Japanese name, and we've referred to her as Peach to this day. So with that said, I haven't heard many complaints regarding this change growing up, but you all can tell me in the comments below why some fans still can't accept the name Dr. Eggman.
Dr. Robotnik! Nobody calls me that anymore.
Hopefully I didn't incite a war down there. So I didn't mention this in the original video, but she was referred to as Princess Peach in the West for the very first time in Yoshi's Safari. It's a minor detail, and this game didn't sell very much, so that's kind of why I just jumped to Mario 64, but I guess it's worth mentioning anyway. So with Peach becoming the official damsel in distress for the majority of the Mario series, she would be solidified as one of the major characters in the franchise, going on to become a playable character in the US release of Super Mario Bros. 2 for the NES. Even though this game is a reskinned version of a game only released in Japan at the time, known as Yume Kojo Doki Doki Panic, this title would be very influential in fleshing out Princess Peach's abilities. We would see examples of this in future Mario games where she can magically float for a few seconds to traverse obstacles, or in the Super Smash Bros. Titles where she can pull out items from the ground to throw at her opponents. We wouldn't see her playable in a traditional Mario game again until her appearance in Super Mario 3D World. But let's not forget about all the spin-offs that gave Princess Peach some additional character. While I'd argue that Super Mario RPG was the first game to give Princess Peach some more personality than the games that came before it, I think Paper Mario deserves the credit for evolving Peach into a more independent and assertive character.
It's been a long time since we saw my man Mario in an RPG, but he's back in style. They're calling this one Paper Mario for obvious reasons. Toonami gives Paper Mario for the N64 9 out of 10.
Paper Mario was first released for the Nintendo 64 in Japan in the year 2000 and 2001 in the West, and this game served as more of a story-driven experience for Mario fans, returning to the role-playing characteristics of Super Mario RPG, and essentially serving as a spiritual successor and sequel for that classic Super Nintendo game. Princess Peach is still kidnapped by Bowser at the beginning of the game, but in a nice twist, the game gives the player control over Peach as she attempts to escape captivity within his castle, which not only serves as a great character development for her, but a nice break between the action from Mario's perspective between chapters. These interludes with Peach have her befriending a star kid named Twink,
sensational,
who will help her communicate with Mario in the meantime. She'll even fight and defeat Kammy Koopa at the end of the game while Mario's taking on Bowser. I believe this to be one of the first times we see Peach offered some of the spotlight, and though you could argue Paper Mario is more of a spin-off to the traditional Mario games and characters, this was definitely a welcome change to the formula when it was released. Not to mention they would continue to involve Peach similarly in the sequel, Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, and following that they would include her as a completely playable character in Super Paper Mario. It wouldn't be long before Princess Peach got her own game altogether, with Nintendo releasing Super Princess Peach for the Nintendo DS in October of 2005 in Japan and February 2006 in the West. But before I get into that, technically this wasn't the first Mario game to star Peach as the only playable character. McDonald's was way ahead of the game back in 1990 with their scratch cards.
It's Mario! Look, Ronald! Mario's mystery block makes him big!
LCD Game Watches promoting the release of Super Mario World were one of the prizes. There were 3 different watches, each with a different game: Mario's Egg Catch, Luigi's Hammer Toss, and Princess Toadstool's Castle Run. This was basically Temple Run before Temple Run. So next time someone says that Peach hasn't started her own game aside from Super Princess Peach, show them your enlightenment and preach the gospel of Princess Toadstool's Castle Run. Anyway, Super Princess Peach switched up the Mario formula a little bit with Bowser kidnapping Mario, Luigi, and the Toads. And in Peach's defense, by the way, Mario gets kidnapped quite a bit too. So with all the usual heroes in Bowser's clutches on Vibe Island, where he builds a summer getaway home, Princess Peach steps up to the plate to get her friends back, while Toadsworth gives her a talking parasol named Perry to assist her on her adventure. This game has mechanics built around emotions, with Bowser using something called a Vibe Scepter.
Oh my god, what is that, a dildo?
That allows him to influence the emotions of his army. With this in mind, Peach has 4 different vibes she can use that will trigger abilities to help her on her journey. For example, if the player uses Joy, Peach's happiness will allow her to float and reach obstacles that are hard to reach. Also, Perry, that talking umbrella I told you about, he used to be a real boy with magical powers living with some old man before getting zapped into his umbrella form by some hating magicians. Pinocchio, is that you?
Everything is new to me.
You, stand back! Don't come near me!
He manages to wiggle out of their captivity and was found by a traveling merchant that sold him to Toadsworth. And I have to wonder what he was doing with Perry before he handed him over to Princess Peach. Anyway, Peach manages to track down Bowser, and together with Perry she defeats him and ousts him from his own villa, freeing Mario in the process. And as for Perry, if you thought they found some way to transform him back into a human, nah, that wasn't Mario and the gang's priority here. Back in the cage for you, Perry. On a more serious note, this is one of the few Nintendo games I couldn't find many development notes on. I would have loved to have been able to pin down exactly what the thought process was behind this game, but here's my guess. The Nintendo DS itself. The DS is one of the best-selling handheld systems of all time, and with its stylus-based hardware, it made games more accessible to a wider audience, especially casual gamers. I'm sure this mindset is also what made the Nintendo Wii so successful. Nintendo reported that 44% of DS owners were female, so I imagine Super Princess Peach was an attempt to move software for the younger female demographic. And it worked. The game sold 1.15 million copies worldwide, putting it in the top 50 best-selling DS games. But this game wouldn't be the first time Peach takes matters into her own hands though. Let's switch it up to Super Mario Adventures, a set of comics that were published within Nintendo Power from January to December 1992. Though it's loosely based on Super Mario World, this comic takes quite a few liberties with the Mario characters, and builds its own original plot. Mario and Luigi are plumbers in the peaceful Mushroom Kingdom before Bowser and his minions pull up to ask for Peach's hand in marriage. He threatens to turn all her people into stone if she refuses, and even turns Mario into stone to prove his point. Enraged, Princess Peach fights her way to Bowser's castle to attempt a negotiation with him, but at the tail end of her journey, she is captured. This brings Mario and Luigi into action, but this comic series is a little different, because just because she's captured, doesn't mean Peach is out of the fight. She actually tricks the Koopalings into thinking she escaped her cell and drops down from the ceiling, which knocks them out cold. Wendy and several guards try to stop her, but Peach manages to get to Wendy's room and she fucking scraps. She throws furniture at the guards and threatens Wendy by saying she'll shred her favorite dress. But her escape's not done here. She grabs a cape and falls through the window and manages to fly to safety. Unfortunately, Mario is captured during his attempt to save Peach. So what does she do? She goes back to the tower with a ton of bombs and threatens to blow up the entire building if they don't free Mario. This is the OG badass Peach. Personally, I think this series deserves a read, and I wouldn't be too surprised if there was some inspiration taken from this comic for the upcoming Super Mario Bros. Movie. Speaking of which, this movie seems to be switching up the formula as well, with Luigi serving as the character that needs to be saved, while Peach will become a wartime princess, coaching Mario on the ways of the Mushroom Kingdom before they bring the fight to Bowser. When the time comes, I'm definitely open to revisiting the movie versions of all these characters so we get an idea of what exactly has changed.
Must be some kind of communist plot. How do you figure that, Sarge? It's in the red zone.
Luigi is quite an interesting character since he was initially designed for multiplayer purposes in early Mario titles. But let's be real, he was just a color swap Mario. I'm sorry, Luigi. I wondered whether or not I wanted to make an origin video at all for Luigi since he's so closely tied to Mario's beginnings. But I think it's worth talking about nonetheless. How did this palette swap become a separate character with his own unique lovable personality? Welcome to Origin Oracle, everyone. I am the Mentalk, the Prophet, YouTube savior, so kick back, grab a snack, and let's head back in time. So I'm sure if you ask people when Luigi first appeared in a video game, some casual gamers may say the first Super Mario Bros. Released in 1985.
Wrong.
Others might say the Mario Bros. Arcade game released in 1983. But this would also be wrong. Funny enough, even Nintendo at one point acknowledged this title as Luigi's first appearance.
Luigi first appeared in the Mario Bros. Arcade game, which was first released on July 14, 1983.
But no, the very first time we'd see Mario's twin brother Luigi was in a Game & Watch title, Mario Bros, released in March 1983. So I saw some scrutiny in the comments section on the original video, so I decided to post a little bit more evidence. Some people are saying that the dates were crossed up and maybe the Game & Watch version came out at the same time as the arcade version or vice versa, yada yada yada. So I decided to go into the public records of the US Copyright Office to get some information. So as we can see here, the patent for registration for the Mario Bros. Arcade game was initially July 19th, 1983. But the actual date of publication here is April 4th, 1983. So what does date of publication mean in the Copyright Office? Well, according to the Copyright Office themselves, generally publication occurs on the date on which copies of the work are first made available to the public. So these dates were probably the Japanese release dates. So for the Mario Bros. Arcade game, date of publication Nintendo registered was April 4th, 1983. For the Game & Watch, it was March 14th, 1983. So even though they registered the patent in the US in August 30th, 1983, the date of publication, which is the date that the Game & Watch for Mario Bros. Was first available to the public, was March 14th, 1983. So if these records are to be believed, Luigi's debut game was the Game & Watch version of Mario Bros. The Game & Watch were a series of handheld games created by Nintendo from 1980 to 1991, which had pretty simple games displayed on an LCD screen like Ball and Chef.
Cool.
This predated the original Nintendo Entertainment System, and despite its simplicity, this was a very successful product for Nintendo, selling around 43 million units worldwide. We'd eventually see Nintendo create Game & Watch handhelds for their most popular characters at the time, Mario and Donkey Kong. And you can tell that the Game & Watch holds a special place in their hearts, because not only have they paid homage to it in several games like Super Smash Bros. And the WarioWare franchise, but they've even remade some of these titles and re-released them for the Nintendo DS. Speaking of the DS, the Game & Watch also had games that were released on a multi-screen device. Which I think had to have had some influence on the development of the Nintendo DS. Anyway, this brings us back full circle to the Game & Watch title Mario Bros, which was played on 2 screens. So now you'll have to use your imagination a little bit here, but these are the original sprites for Mario and Luigi. Despite them looking a little worse for wear, you can actually see subtle differences between the two characters, which I have to give props to Nintendo to consider for a title like this. Let's pull up the box art real quick. There we go. That is the first time we'd see Luigi in a video game. Mario and Luigi here are working at the bottling plant, and it's your job to make sure that they properly load boxes of bottles onto a delivery truck. This requires you to have Luigi and Mario pass the packaged bottles back and forth between the screens along conveyor belts until it reaches the delivery truck. If you screw this up and a package falls, you get berated by the foreman. We all gotta start somewhere, I guess. This game was released 3 months prior to the Mario Bros. Arcade game, which was the first time we'd see the Mario Bros. Featured as plumbers. So I'd like to think they got fired from this particular gig.
Oh my god, how dare you do this to us! Tough guy killing construction workers!
All that aside, Mario Bros. For Game & Watch made it possible for 2 players to play at the same time, making this the very first 2-player Mario game as well. We'd even see re-releases for this game in Game & Watch Gallery 3 and 4 for the Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance respectively. For those modern versions of the game, Nintendo decided to do away with the bottling factory, having Mario and Luigi working at a cake factory instead, with Wario, of all people, driving the delivery truck. This looks like a lost minigame from Mario Party if anything. But much like the original, Mario and Luigi are still using the conveyor belt to pass the cakes back and forth to get them safely on the delivery truck, so Wario can drive it to who the hell knows where.
Oh my god!
Oh, and Bowser is actually in here too, just trying to fuck up their day, so that's fun. But how did they come up with Luigi in the first place? Well, it all goes back to Shigeru Miyamoto conjuring up the idea of the original Mario Bros. Arcade title. He wanted to create an arcade game similar to that of Joust, one of the more successful multiplayer arcade games at that time. Gunpei Yokoi, who also worked on Donkey Kong, wanted to create a game where Mario could fall from any height, and while Miyamoto was reluctant at first, this idea would heavily influence the abilities of the character going forward. They developed a prototype which involved Mario jumping around multiple levels of a stage to defeat enemies, but to increase the difficulty, they introduced this mechanic of having to flip enemies before touching them to defeat them. Luigi was brought into the mix for multiplayer mode, designed as the twin brother of Mario, and due to hardware limitations, there were only so many colors they could go with to depict him, so they just went with green overalls. So as I mentioned in Mario's origin video, Mario's name came from Nintendo of America's colorful landlord that loved to come shake them down for rent, Mario Segale. But how did Luigi get his name? According to Miyamoto, he just looked up the most popular Italian name after Mario, which turned out to be
Tony. I know you did a good thing first, and I know you've been lying low for a long time.
Just kidding, it was Luigi. It just so happens that Luigi is pronounced Ruigi in Japanese, which translates to similar. So yes, Luigi's name has been a play on words this entire time. And just like that, Mario has a fully fledged twin brother, ready to help defeat enemies lurking within the sewers of New York. So this would be Luigi's role in Mario games from that point on, appearing in Super Mario Bros. As Player 2, this time with a green shirt and white overalls. He would control identically to Mario, but doesn't have much presence in the overall story. Yeah, poor guy isn't mentioned in the story in either the Japanese or Western manuals. Princess Peach does acknowledge him by name if he gets to the end of the game though. You did it, Luigi.
I did it.
Nintendo didn't take very long in differentiating Luigi from his brother though, giving our boy a higher and further jump than Mario in the sequel, Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels. Though this does seem useful, Luigi is a little bit more slippery when it comes to landing jumps, but in all honesty, I always preferred his mechanics over Mario's. Even though we wouldn't see this game in the US until the Super Mario Bros. All-Stars remake for the Super Nintendo, the US version of Super Mario Bros. 2 also gave Luigi a different set of strengths and weaknesses. He's the highest jumper in the game, but has the second lowest strength, which is why he takes some extra time to lift objects in comparison to, say, Mario and Toad. By the way, according to this game, Toad is fucking jacked. But if we're going to talk about the actual origins of Luigi, we have to go to the earliest point in the Super Mario series, Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. So I covered most of this game in both Mario and Bowser's origin videos, so without retreading too much ground, let's talk about baby Luigi for a minute. As you all know by now, Mario and Luigi are being delivered to their parents by the stork when Kamek tries to capture them after foreseeing they'll be a nuisance to Bowser in the future. Kamek is successful in grabbing Luigi while baby Mario falls onto Yoshi's Island and is taken in by the Yoshis to save his brother. So there's not much to Luigi in this game's story since he's captive the whole time, along with this stressed out stork, but I've heard a great theory somewhere that Luigi's personality may have been determined at this very moment. Think about it for a second. These are newborn babies that are put in a stressful situation from the jump. Baby Mario here is taken in by the loving Yoshi tribe and goes on this grand adventure watching Yoshi take down enemy after enemy to save the day. The moment Yoshi slips up and loses track of Mario, he bursts out into this endless wail. But the Yoshis do everything in their power to make sure he doesn't fall into the hands of the Toadies. Yeah, that's what these things are called, by the way. And Luigi, on the other hand, is stuck captive in this scary castle with a stork that's freaking out next to him the whole time, unsure of his fate. Then we fast forward to the future. Mario grows up to be adventurous, heroic, and always ready to step up to save the day. While Luigi, who has the potential to be a hero, is always cautious and a little more cowardly in overwhelming situations. I'd say if the roles were reversed and Luigi was saved by the Yoshis instead, I think he'd be the main hero of the Mushroom Kingdom in my opinion. Anyway, since I've covered Yoshi's Island quite a bit, I'm gonna switch things up and talk about a slightly different version of Baby Luigi. Rewind back to 1995, around the release of Yoshi's Island, there was a series of Japanese comedy manga books known as 4-Koma Gak Battle that featured some comics based around Mario titles. Their very first Mario adaptation was none other than Yoshi's Island, followed up by a volume known as Super Mario Daishugo, or roughly translated Super Mario Great Collection. In this comic, they put a spin on Yoshi's Island where Baby Mario actually dies from hitting the ground because Yoshi misses the catch. So you'd think Baby Luigi would be devastated by this news, but that's not even the case. He's here contemplating all the great games in his future like Luigi World and Luigi Kart. Even Kamek is so disturbed by this that he tosses Luigi out of Bowser's castle instead. And yes, this was definitely approved by Nintendo, so I think we need a game with this Luigi somewhere. So all of this seems pretty straightforward, right? Luigi was basically this player 2. We would see him in a few other games like Super Mario World, still as player 2. But when did we see Luigi actually come into his own? You know, like maybe being featured in a game somewhere? I'm not talking about what you're thinking right now.
Luigi, what do you say we give a Bowser the old Brooklyn 1-2?
The Brooklyn what?
Yeah, I have to bring this game up. This is Mario is Missing, which stars Luigi, released back in 1993. Actually, his first solo game was Luigi's Hammer Toss, which you already discussed in the Peach video. This was Nintendo's attempt to cash in on the wave of educational games that were super popular in the early 90s. And when I say super popular, I don't mean little kids were clamoring to get their hands on educational games. Educational games were software that a lot of companies were investing in, which resulted in a lot of trash and vaporware. But this vaporware had me speeding through my work at school so I can at least play some type of game while I was in class. But for the point of this video, Nintendo wanted to throw their hat in the ring too. Poor Luigi finally gets a chance to star in a game, and it's this.
California, here I come. The West Coast with Uncle Sam.
Since more households were getting access to personal computers, this was a way to trick young, impressionable children to get an education. Just sit them in front of the computer, say you got them a Mario game, and let the learning begin. I say this as one of those kids, but my experience was with Mario's Time Machine, the follow-up to this game. I didn't have a Super Nintendo as a kid, so when I saw this CD-ROM, imagine my disappointment when I found out I was just learning history with Mario here. Yo, and to add insult to injury, there's like a laundry list of historical inaccuracies in this game, which I think would make for a perfect live stream, by the way. Anyway, Mario is Missing has like 4 different versions. One for the MS-DOS, the NES, the SNES, and a Mac version that came out a year later. It begins with Bowser cooking up a plan to steal all of Earth's treasures so he can pay for a shitload of hair dryers that will help him melt the ice of Antarctica. All Bowser really has to do is wait. We're already melting Antarctica ourselves. So his plan can go smoothly. He kidnaps Mario in some roundabout way, and this changes depending on the version you're playing. Like the DOS version, Mario decides to go into Bowser's Antarctica castle first and just randomly eats candy served to him by Bowser on a plate, no questions asked. But somehow this gets him trapped in a net? So it's up to Luigi to go through portals that lead to random places around the world to find Mario. So I guess the educational spin here is that you're learning about the cities you're exploring on your quest to save Mario. And after you manage to recover all the missing artifacts, it's time to face Bowser. And this is where you would find out Mario was in the castle the whole time. But look at this, Luigi just walks up there and rips Bowser's shell off, and Spartan kicks him off the castle wall to save Mario. Where is this Luigi these days? Or rather, I guess the real question is, when did Luigi become the more timid, cowardly Mario brother? Did he just suddenly appear this way when Luigi's Mansion released back in 2001? Well, many would argue that Luigi was always a more timid character than Mario, and this would be cemented in a lot of people's minds due to the DiC cartoons. Super Mario Super Show, The Adventures of Super Mario 3, and Super Mario World all depicted Luigi as a more cautious and clumsy character, probably to serve as a foil to Mario's more headstrong attitude. I can't find any proof that Luigi's current personality was directly based on these versions of the character, But when Luigi's Mansion came out, I remember never once questioning how he was portrayed, leading me to think that we were already used to him being this way in those early cartoons. Just as a side note, I find it cool that I'm seeing a pattern of these traits from Deke cartoons being forever ingrained in these characters, much like Sonic's chili dog obsession from Adventures of Sonic the Hedgehog. I've seen some comments suggest that the Atari commercial for Mario Brothers is probably what introduced that whole timid characteristic.
Mario, where are you?
Others have said the voice actor for Luigi, Charles Martinet, depicted him that way during a live event.
So there I am, doing Mario in real time. And I've got this hockey mask helmet that's like stuck on my head. So I'm going around the country doing this at Walmart's in the parking mall shop, when people are opening. And these kids always come up to the TV set and they go, "Hey, Mario, can we please speak to your brother Luigi?" "Yeah, what do you want?" "You want to come up and say hello to everybody?" "No, I'm too shy. Besides, I'm in the kitchen making spaghetti meatballs."
So I wanted to present those two as potential influences as well. Anyway, Luigi's Mansion officially put Luigi in the spotlight for his very own game, giving us the lovable, timid version of the character that we have today. Much like Mario is missing, Mario is captured again, but this time by King Boo, who has him locked in a painting within a haunted mansion that Luigi must brave. This game was pretty much developed because Nintendo wanted to flex the new lighting technology within the GameCube. It was originally intended to star Mario in some kind of dollhouse with gameplay mechanics based on a dungeon system from Legend of Zelda. The setting would soon evolve into an American-style haunted house, but they thought it would be somewhat out of character to have Mario nervously walking around a haunted house, so they opted for Luigi to be the central character instead. This successful title would pave the way for two sequels, Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon and Luigi's Mansion 3. Also, if you guys can track down that arcade version of Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon somewhere, I think you should definitely try it out. So Luigi's Mansion would spark a new interest in the character, and for Luigi's 30th year of existence, Nintendo would celebrate the Year of Luigi back in 2013 and 14, releasing titles and special editions to certain games to put the focus on Luigi. Luigi's Mansion Dark Moon would release for the 3DS that year, along with Mario and Luigi's Dream Team, another entry to the Mario and Luigi series with more plot and gameplay mechanics focused around Luigi himself. He'd be featured in an expansion to New Super Mario Bros. U as well, called New Super Luigi U for the Wii U. That's a mouthful. This is around the time Nintendo was using the most confusing naming conventions for their games and systems. They even made an updated version to the original Mario Bros. Game called Luigi Bros, which more or less is the same game. It just excludes Mario as a playable character. I'm curious to hear everyone's thoughts on this event because I found it a bit lackluster at the time. Though I'm a huge fan of the Luigi's Mansion series, I was expecting a bit more from a name like Year of Luigi, but I could be wrong. So that, everyone, is the origins of Luigi, and for the record, I find his character to be a lot more interesting and charming than Mario. Luigi himself adds a lot of character to the games where he's featured, and I know in this video I didn't even mention his Paper Mario version or how competitive he gets on the racetrack here. If you made it this far, you're a legend, and if you're still listening to me right now, leave a comment that say only legends know. I know I stole that from Corey Kenshin, but I want to see who would post that in the comment section. I will pin the first comment that says it. Anyway, thank you guys for watching this compilation. I added a bunch of new stuff, so hopefully you guys caught those new little amendments to some of these videos because I wanted to perfect a lot of them. So thanks again so much, and I will be doing a part 2 of this compilation at some point, but next up is Donkey Kong.